Number 10. Joseph Haydn. The idea of finding the greatest in any medium, one destination can be in finding those artists who possesses a level of technical efficiency that they not only set a standard not found prior to their work, but also that standard becomes one that only influences more and more great works afterwards in their wake. In the case of classical music, few artists come to mind as setting a mastery of the form like Joseph Haydn, for whenever I listen to these works, many of them express not only a perfect structure, but said structure is one of the most joyous things to ever listen to in the medium. At the end of the day, there is a blissful quality to Haydn found where in an area of the classical period was a new way of expressing a more explicit form of entertainment through music. Haydn, throughout many decades of composition, found a pure modern expression of how the sounds he created can be such a sensational experience for someone. His work is some of the most entertaining and easiest to digest classical music you can ever listen to, and while that may suggest at first glance that he may not have that much to offer in terms of depth, as I have said, this was a major part of his perspective, yet at the same time, this still wouldn't do his entire oeuvre justice. Take his infamous Surprise Symphony, where its second movement all comes down to one singular joke, structured to have a repetitive timing to hit that one moment of said, well, surprise. As you can probably tell, Haydn allowed himself to lean into transgressions whenever he felt he needed to express the emotions he wanted to show in a precise, yet very accessible manner. Yet you also have when he wants to showcase drama, either through his more ambitious symphonies like the Farewell, or even past that in his religiosity through his choral work, like the Creation. All of this in mind shows that with this efficiency that Haydn showcases, it didn't limit him to be less adventurous, to have a fundamental understanding of any work he so chose and allowed for any one of them to make with absolute mastery. While his work has only gotten more and more ingrained in popular culture, and as someone who grew up with Haydn since childhood, it was his blissful melodies and growing appreciation of versatility that leaves Haydn with a near unparalleled legacy for many other great composers to follow. And I love it. Number 9. Georg Friedrich Händel. In an era before Haydn's, the late Baroque style was finding itself into what would become modern interpretations of established aesthetics. Thus, the period saw a breadth of new sounds blending what was seen as a solemn, sacred perspective with an almost as refined style that didn't fully adhere to antiquity, sometimes even simply looking at the material world around us for inspiration. And no one showed that truly modern style of composition and thematics like the work of Georg Friedrich Händel. Händel, by many accounts, was a composer that made sacred-based works, but some of his most famous pieces in all the Baroque period being that of his Messiah or the Coronation Anthems. This, like music of its time, represented its subject matter by interpreting the journey that they go on as a gradual escalation into a large climax, which suggests we will be able to see what awaits us in the heavens as our ultimate reward. A glorious statement, meant to inspire everyone. While this represents only one part of Handel's aesthetics, it does not represent the whole, and instead what might be more interesting are the works he saw as just as possible to be of such immense splendor. His telling of fireworks, modern age concertos for oboes and organs, an entire saga collection simply based on trying to interpret through music the very element of water. The grand reimaginings had no limit to Handel. When listened to, one already has a strong understanding of the amount of emotion poured into these secular concepts that deserve a deep respect as somebody from his deeply religious background. Another composer I've listened to since I was a child, the work of Handel was a unique experience compared to most of his contemporaries. As an artist, I always brought a special beauty to any subject, even when I didn't know what it was at the time. When I finally understood the complexities of opera, the differentiations of concertos and masses, anything he touched felt more powerful in his image. And in an era comprised of many concertos that seek to convey many of these deep feelings, it speaks volumes that Handel still stands as an irreplaceable part of it. Number 8. Frédéric Chopin. When it comes to the very practice of piano, many musicians throughout all of music's history show its versatility for any expression and idea to be fully realized by its player. However, Frédéric Chopin would definitely be of the pantheon as being the composers that are simply synonymous with the mere composition for that singular instrument. And there is a very good reason for it, because it's impossible to hear any of the master's work and not immediately recognize its signature touch. Chopin's work, in comparison to many that came before, is a very solemn expression of piano composition. Instead of work that presents an energetic, upbeat style in the classical tradition, he instead sought to bring a complete serious approach to piano. There are no extreme examples of complex melodies with extreme various amounts of 16th note scales for spectacle. The pieces and their soft melodies always shine in their sensitivity. Even in their most light moments, there is a richness with every note suggesting a deep contemplation with every piece he ever wrote. Throughout his life, Chopin had a very up and down short life, becoming very successful while he was in his 20s, being close friends with other composers like Franz Liszt. Yet he personally also had a troubling romantic life with failed engagements, and only at the age of 39 would he die from a severe illness. Yet, while this life can be seen as an influence to how he would compose, at the end of the day, The works in it of themselves allowed for Chopin to be confident despite rarely being as expressive as other composers. Like I've said, his work just has this tranquil quality to them that can be seldom found in most works of art from any medium. It's the kind of art made that truly is a marvel to behold, in its one of a kind beauty, a beauty that only becomes stronger no matter whatever else came before or after. Number 7. Richard Wagner. There are the epics in art, and then there are the epics. But then there is the epic scale only found in the work of Richard Wagner. Wagner, very much so, is a composer known for his specific aesthetic in art that pledges towards the grandiose stories and feelings to be discovered in life. His famous operas being ones with long run times, songs that feel like they take up an eternity, all in these stories of kings, knights, and gods from the skies. Because of these stories he chose to bring to the stage, everything surrounding these works is demanded to be large, to have the entire orchestra be present in signaling this grandeur, so that when we hear these climaxes of immense sound, it is for Wagner the ultimate artistic statement. Wagner, more than most composers, was a strong, singular visionary in his works, always being in every stage of production, his absolute towering persona, and famously known for being the one to write his own librettos for every opera he made. His pioneering technique of leitmotifs, reoccurring melodies representing characters, places, or things to make his work have an even bigger, broad universal message that is completely comprehensible to immerse yourself into these grand legends that he wants to tell through the medium of opera. It was, of course, through these operas where I first witnessed Wagner's power. Yet for me, personally, there was this inspiring revelation into the complete picture that Wagner portrayed in his aesthetic. It's clear to see his bombast spectacle that is loud as it can be, but then, after all the dust has settled, he presents this more sublime moments, like this. This was the side of Wagner that truly changed me as a whole. After then paying more attention to these more beautiful, peaceful sides of Lohengrin, Siegfried's Idyll, and then all the way to his Will and Testament, Parsifal, showed how over time, Wagner could tap into something that wasn't just an exciting escapist fantasy, but instead a deep meditation which I had never experienced before. And the more I even ponder on his works, from symphonies, choral works, and beyond, the aesthetic of Wagner becomes even stronger in my mind. There will be many who see the style of Wagner as a troubling one to get into. He might as well be the most controversial composer even to this day, not just for his personal prejudices that have proved disheartening to learn about, but the very style of Wagner and its large scale might be daunting for some or just vapid to others. Many of these complaints I can definitely understand. Yet for me personally, I really mean it when I say that when I listen more to Wagner, the more I really attach myself to his work. Because at the heart, there is a deep sincerity in everything that he is doing. From his national beliefs to his controlling persona, he is the face of opera for many generations. And just experiencing any of his work can give a good summation as to the sheer impact a work of music can really bring. Number 6. Ludwig van Beethoven. Ludwig van Beethoven, perhaps more than most composers, is the most synonymous with the medium of music in a way that is unparalleled with most artists, becoming a cornerstone to the history of all time in a pantheon placed within the ranks of Shakespeare and Leonardo da Vinci. Everyone has heard the music of Beethoven, and perhaps no matter where in that spectrum anyone has been able to be in, still shows that they enjoy his work more than most other composers. Yet this isn't surprising, because how can someone listen to his work and not be amazed by it? Beethoven is constantly brought up as a benchmark for music for many reasons that have been studied and analyzed for over 200 years. He is someone whose very existence has been constantly spoken of as to how the very presence of a man who at the end of his career was almost completely deaf still managed to create some of the greatest masterpieces to ever be written for the medium. His Emperor Piano Concerto, the Moonlight Sonata, Egmont, the Turkish March, and of course his symphonies, with his ninth and final one probably being the most famous piece of music to ever be composed. With a catalog that is constantly spoken of, when I decide to personally express my love for his work, I must ask, what is it that makes Beethoven Beethoven? This question is interesting because it's realizing the absolute varying quality in his style, which is perhaps the most notable when reflecting on his aforementioned catalog. Beethoven as an artist was always striving for an innovation to the medium that it became an obsession. Just hearing his Third Symphony, the Eroica, even today, it's amazing to see how transgressive of a piece it still manages to be. From its opening notes to the constant dramatic structure which jumps from bombastic phrases to the elegant and romantic. A moment where it seems like the horn came in early is actually meant to lead as the rest of the orchestra is in response to this small entrance.
Fool! Wrong! Don't interrupt!
Well, it's a copyist's mistake, is it?
What are you trying to do? Wreck my day? It didn't sound right. You didn't obey the rules. No, let's go away. Go over there! Go over there! Piss off!
So much of what is shown in his work still resonates today, because everyone can recognize, like most of our modern music, a visceral, memorable tone that is in every phrase in a Beethoven piece. He is perhaps the first composer to really enter the modern world that was only being set up prior to his entrance, and throughout it all, when I hear this cavalcade of sound charging in, all I can do is just be in awe in its entirety. A showcase of music that simply is that good. Number 5. Johann Sebastian Bach. He is the face of the Baroque period, and yet it is so interesting to see how, in comparison to many of his contemporaries, his work in the context of the entire canon can be described, as in the words of the one Slavoj Žižek, as
First, we have pre-modern music where you have all those references to the Harmonia Mundi, all those referring. Then Bach is the first radical modernizer. He saw no harmony in the world, you have to impose a rational order onto music.
there have been innovative works by the likes of Monteverdi and Purcell, but Bach took that pure harmonic formalism found in the period and transformed it slowly, creating work more expansive, more complex, and perhaps simply more transcendental. The music, when heard in its entirety, might seem like a repetitive experience, like a lot of the period. It's cyclical, balanced, not a lot of showcases of extreme dynamics, but at the same time, I can't help but feel that this only creates a different kind of experience, one which is hypnotic in design and meant to simply be of pure music, which at the end of the day, that is what it is. Bach rarely ever wanted to express drama within his work. Most of his compositions were in the form of orthodox masses, highly structured concertos, and an overall level of pacing that is always moving. This is the Bach style in its entirety because that is all that it needs to be. Yet when I hear his work, I still am surprised by so many pieces coming up with new experiences and ideas of how to use any instrument. I think about how his choral work just becomes more impactful, like Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, or the figures that he would use with the organ. Bach just had a profound understanding of his craft, better than most composers even today, and ever since there may be those that try and transgress with tonality. There may be those in the melodic period that create the most complex works imaginable. But Bach reminds us how his modernizations still leave room to demonstrate a true mastery of the fundamentals, something that no matter how many try, no one has really been able to have been called an equal, and perhaps it's best to leave it as so. Number 4. Gustav Mahler. I surprisingly, when organizing this entire list, have found that of all the composers that eventually I had to write about in detail, the work of Gustav Mahler has always came as something I never 100% feel confident to express. It might seem then, as I say that his work is something extraordinarily complex in terms of craft and theory that I can't summarize automatically, but that's not it at all. Simply put, if I was to describe Mahler's work, it would be that of a very personal kind, perhaps more than any other composer on this list, and any discussion I may have simply wouldn't be enough. Mahler's work is like that of many late romantics of his time. His symphonies are these large epics of sound and concept, with his Third Symphony in particular still cited to this day as the longest running symphony for any orchestra to perform at over 100 minutes. There is just so much about his style that feels full as it constantly shifts between tones and feelings, phrases that are meant to be calming that are then interrupted by these violent waves of chaos. It is on the base level that one can enjoy the work of Mahler, but looked at very closely, one can find how so much of why his work is the way it is made stems from a constant reminder of many parts of his own life. His traumatic childhood filled with domestic abuse, the wonder he had for the natural world around him, the full-on Freudian relationships he would have, particularly with his wife Alma, in which Freud himself would discuss such matters with Mahler once, in 1910. It's a large web of moments and ideas that are fully exposed in his work, no more so than a poet expressing his feelings through words, almost in an autobiographical sense. It's as important to Mahler as the music itself. When we hear works like Songs of Dying Children or the Adagio to his Fifth Symphony directly for his beloved Alma, a viewer can tell something is personal, but for Mahler, it might as well be literal. Thus, I find myself always worried of my own projections. Maybe it makes me say how much of this man's life reflects my own, both its pretty and ugly parts. Yet, I must admit, I also of course know that the reason this happens at all is because his craftsmanship and passion is at an idiosyncratic level that I am constantly so inspired by. So all I can say for now is that is enough for me. Number 3. Antonio Vivaldi. I mentioned earlier how much Bach might be seen as the face of the Baroque period, but Antonio Vivaldi is arguably a contender to be called the pure perfection of the era's style more than anyone of his time. In general, the harmonic semi-cyclical form of composition of the Baroque period, where there is only one singular destination from beginning to end, all the while with these harmonics, the sounds that someone like Vivaldi made was something so euphoric. Vivaldi, along with someone like Handel, was an artist who saw the beauty of the sacred along with the secular. With every piece that he made, like the Four Seasons, he would then make something like his Gloria. Yet his perspective was as someone who was the opposite of Handel, as an individual in defiance of the norms from the church. Thus, it was his job in his mind to craft a world that allowed for a constant steady pace, that allowed elegance in his sounds. Nothing in his work sounds completely crude, yet never being too sanitized. It is this balance act which was thriving during this lucrative time where something could be so powerful to all, and Vivaldi knew it. It is work like this which I imagine has seen complaints over many generations for its repetitiveness, the overly bright styles of topics that maybe aren't as cutting edge as they should be. In other words, one could view the work of Vivaldi as a product of its time, as does with many other Baroque composers, either influencing or influenced by Vivaldi. Yet, as if I haven't made it clear already, this period, I believe, should not be done a disservice, because what people can learn from Vivaldi's period is the beautiful significance that is a part of the aesthetics many wanted to express, where there can be something profound in a simple, circular rhythm that can go on in eternity, or the simple sounds of a lute that all speak first and foremost of a transcendental style, because that is what Vivaldi is. He has always been a deeply personal composer in my life, precisely for these expressions that have always reminded me of what lies beyond our own realms of reality, that our earth, our lives are just so incredibly touching. That I can always remember when he made me smile, that has never left me to this day. Number 2. Anton Bruckner. It's funny how the most recent composer in my lifetime that I have fully become in love with would be the one I have probably spoken of to myself and others more than any other composer prior. This is because, especially from a religious lens, Bruckner has done more to remind me of my love and affection for the divine more than any other artist I can possibly think of. Bruckner's devout beliefs allow for his work to be complete prayers to the heavens, and thus, what else would there even be to say that would express the absolute beauty found in Bruckner's inner soul? I've been so ingrained into the world of Anton Bruckner so much in the past few years that at this point I don't even know how to expand my thoughts further. Yet, like all of these composers I have mentioned thus far, that should probably be the point. Like all great art, there will always be comparison to something so ethereal that we cannot just put them in a material sense. This is not just music. This is a form of communication that we are meant to feel, all down to how his perfection of sculpting time and space in his compositions will all speak for itself, as well as us simply experiencing it firsthand. Like Rembrandt or Andrei Tarkovsky, there is this undeniable religious background to this art that must be assessed outright at the beginning whenever discussing his work. As I learn about him, I often think about how unfairly misunderstood he was for his constant need to revise and express his writings. Yet I also ponder about how perhaps in an age where the late 19th century was leading to modernity, that he must have been born in the wrong time and deserved to be in an era where antiquity was all that there was. But then again, it is because of the modern time he was born into that the complete aesthetic of his works would never be brought into fruition if he had been born before so. He understood and revered the work of Wagner, Beethoven, and Schubert, and only sought to take that spectacle and mold it with his religiosity. It's like a combination of harmonic with the melodic, Baroque, and Romantic. All I can say to explain why Bruckner is great is to ask you to listen to him, because he has done a lot for my perspective of art more than many others. It is all heard and not told. Yet, perhaps I'll once again repeat a few of Bruckner's words of dedication in his final work to cap off this segment. You see, I have already dedicated 2 earthly majesty symphonies to poor King Ludwig as the royal patron of the arts, to our illustrious dear Emperor as the highest earthly majesty, whom I acknowledge. And now I dedicate my last work to the majesty of all the majesties, the beloved God, and hope that he will give me so much time to complete the same. Number 1. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And so, I couldn't resist. I could not resist having perhaps the most popular and recognizable composer to top as number 1. Yet even more on a personal level, the composer I've known about the longest. It's an absolutely biased perspective to say how I have grown up listening to Mozart's music when I was very little, as have many throughout my time and much longer. So when it came to finding out which composer would be crowned as my favorite, it automatically came into my mind that it had to be simply hearing any piece from that person would excite me more than any other, that his mere presence would be an influence for my life for many, many years. So thus, there was no other choice, simply none. Mozart, probably more than Beethoven, in the entirety of classical music history, still remains as the pop culture icon which everyone knows. Even if you don't consistently listen to classical music in your entire life, you have heard the work of Mozart, and even the mere character of the composer still towers over the popular consciousness to this day. So why is it, for the purpose of this list, that I, Esteban, am so touched by his work? Well, if I were to summarize my feelings towards Mozart in a single word, it would have to be eclecticism. Mozart's work spanned across many categories, from symphonies, concertos, hymns, operas, all of which he managed to bring his own singular vision that even by the standards of the 18th century were seen as very cutting edge and transgressive. Because listening to these pieces gives me a rush of excitement that is incomparable. You know exactly what a Mozart piece sounds like when you hear it for the first time. Its playful edge, the chromatic experiments with large arrays of fast, speedy notes going at a rapid pace, and of course, his excessive use of trills as if he have always found some excuse to place them as much as he can, like an excited kid waiting to go to a candy store. With all of this array of entertainment, what really makes Mozart more than just a celebrity of the moment is how, with this moniker of being a child prodigy, where it seemed like he could just magically arrange a full piece in an instant, play piano entirely blindfolded, there still is a clear maturity that evokes later on in his career, where even he knew that to find something truly meaningful, one must be restrained. One must learn to find drama in art. When he writes his later symphonies, piano concertos, all the way up to his finished Requiem, it can be almost shocking that this comes from the same young man who writes songs about asses or an opera about the delinquency of love triangles. That's because Mozart has always allowed to challenge himself to be able to make exactly the kind of music he wants to make. I simply don't know what else I can add. More than music, Mozart has permanently etched himself into the canon of art and of all human culture, especially of a kind where truly anyone can enjoy it. Many composers here are masters of their craft. Many composers here are absolute cornerstones for all of music history, but few can say that they can enter into the zeitgeist for many generations and still feel completely idiosyncratic. Mozart is what I wish my art to feel like, is what I wish many art to feel like. He is a true inspiration to me, to everyone. He is the greatest composer to ever live.